In the smoky back rooms of Warner Brothers Studios, 1942, a single red pen hovered over what became the most quoted line in cinema history. One studio executive was convinced it had to go. He almost succeeded. Almost. Tonight, we uncover the untold story of how Hollywood's greatest romantic line nearly died before it could make the world fall in love. Picture this: Humphrey Bogart, cigarette dangling from his lips, staring into Ingrid Bergman's eyes as the cameras rolled for the final time on that fateful scene. The words that would echo through eternity were about to spill from his lips. But in the executive boardroom 3 floors above, Hal B. Wallis was reaching for his red pen. The line that would define romance for generations was about to be murdered before it could take its first breath. The year was 1942, and America was at war. Hollywood was churning out propaganda films and patriotic tailies, but buried in the chaos of wartime production was a little anti-Nazi film that nobody at Warner Brothers believed would amount to much. Casablanca was just another picture on the assembly line, another contract fulfillment for a studio system that treated movies like widgets in a factory. But hidden within its pages was a line so perfect, so crystalline in its emotional truth, that it would survive assassination attempts from the very people paid to recognize greatness. What they didn't know, what none of them could have predicted, was that this single line would become the heartbeat of the film, the moment that transformed a simple wartime melodrama into an eternal monument to love, loss, and the bittersweet beauty of sacrifice. It was a line born not from careful calculation, but from the desperate improvisation of actors and writers racing against time, fighting against a system that valued efficiency over artistry, commerce over poetry. The studio executive who wanted it cut believed he was protecting the film from sentimentality, from the kind of romantic excess that sophisticated audiences would reject. He was wrong. Spectacularly, historically, eternally wrong. But for 72 terrifying hours, he nearly succeeded in his mission to sanitize cinema's greatest love. Story. Hal B. Wallis wasn't just any studio executive. He was Warner Brothers' most trusted lieutenant, the man who had shepherded classics like The Adventures of Robin Hood and The Life of Émile Zola to Oscar glory. His instincts were usually flawless, his commercial sense unmatched. But in the case of Casablanca, those very instincts would nearly lead him to commit cinema's greatest crime. Wallis sat in his leather chair, script pages spread before him like battle plans, his mind consumed by a single gnawing fear. The line was too much, too romantic, too sentimental for audiences who were losing sons and husbands in a real war. He had built his reputation on understanding what audiences wanted before they knew it themselves, and everything in his experience told him that Bogart's character would never, could never, say something so nakedly emotional. The pressure was immense. Jack Warner, the studio chief, was breathing down his neck about budget overruns. The film was already behind schedule, and every day of shooting cost thousands of dollars they didn't have. Worse, the screenplay was still being written as they filmed, with writers frantically typing new pages each morning. In this chaos, Wallis saw himself as the guardian of narrative sense, the man who would save the film from its own indulgent impulses. What Wallis couldn't see, what perhaps no one could see in that moment, was that the line wasn't excessive at all. It was essential. It was the emotional keystone that would hold the entire film together, the moment that would transform Rick Blaine from a cynical saloon keeper into cinema's most romantic hero. Without it, the film would have been just another wartime thriller, forgotten within months of its release. But Wallis didn't know this. All he knew was that his red pen was poised to strike, and that he had the power to change the course of cinema history with a single decisive slash. Julius and Philip Epstein weren't just screenwriters, they were word warriors, fighting a daily battle against studio interference and commercial compromise. Twin brothers who shared not only DNA, but a fierce belief in the power of perfect dialogue. They had already survived countless script conferences where their best lines were butchered by committee. But this time, the stakes felt different. This time, they were fighting for something sacred. The brothers had discovered the line almost by accident. Buried in the original play, everybody comes to Rick's, a forgotten piece of source material that most executives hadn't even bothered to read. It wasn't in the original screenplay drafts, wasn't part of anyone's grand design. It emerged organically during late-night rewrite sessions, fueled by coffee and cigarettes and the desperate creativity that comes from impossible deadlines. Philip Epstein would later recall the moment they wrote it, how the words seemed to write themselves, how they looked at each other across their typewriters and knew they had captured something essential about love and loss and the weight of memory. It wasn't just dialogue, it was poetry disguised as conversation. Emotion crystallized into 6 simple words that would carry the freight of an entire film. When word came down from Wallace's office that the line was being considered for deletion, the brothers didn't just resist, they went to war. They understood what Wallace couldn't, that great films aren't built on commercial calculations, but on moments of pure emotional truth. They had spent months crafting Rick Blaine's character, building him from a bitter exile into a man capable of profound sacrifice. And this line was the moment of transformation. The conference room battles were legendary. Writers against executives, art against commerce. The eternal Hollywood struggle played out over 6 words that would define romance for generations. The Epsteins fought with everything they had, knowing that some fights are worth losing careers over. Humphrey Bogart had built his career on playing tough guys, cynics and criminals, men who trusted no one and revealed nothing. The idea of him delivering what amounted to a love poem should have been laughable. Yet somehow, in the alchemy of great acting, Bogart understood what the executives didn't, that the line's power came not from sentimentality, but from its complete honesty. When Bogart heard that Wallace wanted to cut the line, something shifted in his performance. He had already been struggling with the character of Rick Blaine, trying to find the man beneath the cynical exterior. The threatened deletion of the line became, paradoxically, the key to unlocking the character. Bogart realized that Rick was a man who had been hurt so deeply that sincerity had become impossible, until this one moment when love overwhelmed his defenses. The actor began to fight for the line with a passion that surprised everyone on set. Bogart, who was typically professional but distant, became an unlikely champion of romantic dialogue. He understood that the line wasn't sentimental, it was revelatory. It was the moment when Rick's carefully constructed emotional armor finally cracked, revealing the romantic idealist that Lisa had fallen in love with years ago in Paris. In rehearsals, Bogart experimented with different deliveries, trying to find the perfect balance between vulnerability and strength. He knew that if the line felt forced or artificial, it would destroy not just the scene, but the entire film. The weight of cinema history was resting on his shoulders, though he couldn't have known it at the time. Director Michael Curtis watched these rehearsals with growing conviction that the line was not just good, but essential. He began to add his voice to the chorus of creatives fighting against Wallace's editorial instincts, recognizing that sometimes the most important job of a director is to protect his artists from the very studio system that employs them. Ingrid Bergman possessed something that couldn't be taught in acting classes or developed through technique and instinctive understanding of emotional truth that made her one of cinema's greatest actresses. When she first heard Bogart rehearse the line, she didn't need script conferences or executive meetings to know it was perfect. She felt it in her bones, in the way great actors feel the difference between dialogue that serves the story and dialogue that elevates it. Bergman's Lisa Lund was a woman torn between duty and desire, between the man she loved and the cause she believed in. The entire film balanced on her character's emotional journey, and she knew that the line Wallace wanted to cut was the moment that justified everything that came before and after. Without it, her character's sacrifice would feel arbitrary rather than heartbreaking in the days leading up to the scene's filming. Bergman found herself thinking about the line constantly. She would later tell friends that she dreamed about it, that it haunted her with its simple perfection. She began to understand that the line wasn't really about Rick's feelings. It was about Lisa's power to inspire those feelings, to transform a bitter exile into a romantic hero through the sheer force of love. Remembered. When rumors of the potential cut reached her, Bergman did something unprecedented in her career. She requested a private meeting with Hal Wallis. The actress who had built her reputation on professionalism and collaboration was prepared to fight. She argued that the line was the emotional climax, not just of the scene, but of the entire film. That cutting it would be like removing the final brushstroke from a masterpiece. Her passion surprised Wallis, who had expected the Swedish actress to defer to studio authority. Instead, he found himself facing an AR,